This is Atomic Biscuits, and I'm your host, Backfire. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Atomic Biscuits. This is 2025-0720 negative space. We'll start over here at dailysignal.com. House panel probes taxpayer dollars sent to left-wing groups. This is by Fred Lucas. Left-leaning nonprofits receive taxpayer dollars in three key ways: through government contracts and grants, indirectly through government unions, and through taxpayer-funded union time. Daily Signal senior editor Tyler O'Neill told a House panel Tuesday. Federal employees in a union give part of their taxpayer-funded paychecks to the union, ostensibly for representation in bargaining for perks like working from home. Yet instead of using all the money to help employees, unions take a portion of those dues and send it to activist NGOs, that's non-governmental organizations, O'Neill said at a House Judiciary Subcommittee on Oversight hearing titled How Leftist Nonprofit Networks Exploit Federal Tax Dollars to Advance a Radical Agenda. O'Neill, the author of The Woketopus, The Dark Money Cabal Manipulating the Federal Government, talked about some of the unions aligned with government employees, such as the Service Employees International Union and the American Federation of Government Employees, which is part of the AFL-CIO. He noted the SEIU contributed $1.6 million to the liberal New Venture Fund and $1.8 million to the liberal Grantmaker Tides Foundation. Meanwhile, he noted the AFL-CIO gave up $410,000 to New Venture and $100,000 to Tides. Not only did the SEIU and AFL-CIO send part of its members' dues to support leftist causes, but they also benefit from a process known as official time, O'Neill said. Federal employees can bill the taxpayer for time they spend not doing their jobs, but doing work for the union. This creates yet another stream of taxpayer funds supporting unions that then back leftist causes. The U.S. Agency for International Development has contributed significantly to George Soros-aligned organizations that are part of open society foundations, the panelists asserted. I want to underline that I believe it is Soros's right to spend his money supporting his convictions. I may not agree with these ideas, but I would not call for interference with any American's right to act politically, Mike Gonzalez, senior fellow with the Davis Institute for National Security and Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation, told the subcommittee. Likewise, of course, some of the USAID programs did do good. I am glad that Secretary of State Marco Rubio says he will keep some programs if they advance U.S. interests. What I do take issue with is that the U.S. government working with leftist NGOs to promote causes with which large majorities of Americans disagree, and which are inimical to U.S. interests, Gonzalez says. The left has cleverly built a machine to finance itself with money that the taxman extorts from hardworking Americans. During the hearing, House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan, Republican from Ohio, said they are taking your tax dollars and using them against you. House Judiciary Ranking Member Representative Jamie Raskin, Democrat from Maryland, was angry that the House was looking into the matter and said this hearing is just weird. Instead, he and other Democrats tried to shift the conversation to deceased convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Last week, Attorney General Pam Bondi said Epstein did not have a client list of wealthy and influential people from around the world to whom he sex-trafficked underage girls. For years, officials discussed the existence of such a list, but the government never released it. Why don't we have a hearing on what the whole country is talking about right now? Why don't we have a hearing about the continuing suppression and cover-up of the information in the Epstein files? Raskin asked. The SEIU, AFL-CIO, and Open Society foundations did not respond to inquiries for comment as of publication time. Also, the recipients of funding mentioned in the hearing, New Venture Fund and the Tides Foundation, did not respond to requests for comment by publication time. I got to say, we've heard some of these names before, and we know how this laundry works, where money goes in, gets moved all around, some soap is applied, and then out it comes again to do other things. It's your tax money being used against you. That is the least of our worries, but needs to stop right away. Over at redstate.com, Nick Arama posted this article. Hoo boy! Schiff mortgage story heats up big time with report of criminal referral. As we reported on Tuesday morning, President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social about Senator Adam Schiff, Democrat from California, and questions about his primary residence for his mortgage payments. Red State also previously reported the question of Schiff allegedly claiming Maryland as his primary residence while serving as a member of Congress from California. The New York Post is now reporting that there has been a criminal referral made from the Federal Housing Finance Agency to the Department of Justice. A senior administration official told the Post that the Federal Housing Finance Agency, which oversees Fannie Mae, has sent a criminal referral to the Justice Department requesting further investigation. It is extremely serious, and Schiff is not taking it seriously, said that official, who said the senator could face a criminal count for each time he paid his monthly mortgage. That could potentially be a big problem for Schiff. Meanwhile, Schiff seemed to be trying to fluff it out. He tried to deflect by attacking Trump and claiming it was retribution against him. Since I led his first impeachment, Trump has repeatedly called for me to be arrested for treason. So in a way, I guess this is a bit of a letdown, and this baseless attempt at political retribution won't stop me from holding him accountable, not by a long shot, Schiff wrote. This is just Donald Trump's latest attempt at political retaliation against his perceived enemies. So it is not a surprise, only how weak this false allegation turns out to be. And much as Trump may hope, this smear will not distract from his Epstein Files problem. A spokesperson for Schiff added that the lenders who provided the mortgages for both homes were well aware of then Representative Schiff's congressional service and of his intended year-round use of both homes, neither of which were vacation homes. The Federal Housing Finance Agency isn't confirming it one way or another. Schiff's comment is funny. He is accusing Trump of trying to distract with the comment about him, but it's Schiff who's deflecting by talking about Trump. I don't think the deflection will help Schiff much. This story has been out for a while. It didn't originate with Trump. This isn't something that Trump made up. Trump didn't invent the records or the prior reports, so I don't think Schiff can convince too many people with that hot take deflection to Trump. I reported earlier about how Schiff was also attacking Attorney General Pam Bondi over DOJ firings, and he had the gall to speak about ethics. It sounded like he was a bit nervous, frankly. So we'll have to see how this shakes out. But as Schiff and Democrats are fond of saying, no one is above the law, I think we're likely to see a lot of scrambling from Schiff as this rolls out and things proceed. I think we are going to see some foolery. Here's the puppet over here. Have a look over here. Look at this thing over here while smack, smack, smack happens from the other side. And if the first administration is any indicator, it will be a multi-pronged attack, which will make it very difficult to defend against. I was thinking this week also about things that are forgotten, like distance makes the heart grow fonder, that kind of thing, except what happens when it is news items, things that we were really angry about in the Obama administration somehow got harrowed under in the absolute ubiquity of the Biden malfeasance period, right? So we're so now focused on, well, who was in charge of the auto pen that we've forgotten about Obamagate and some other things. So I hope that what we'll see is some of this stuff like, Dan Bongino's not showing up at the FBI since his riff with Bondi. I'm hoping that what we're seeing here is a bunch of theater, and that now what we'll see is this coming together of a lot of different stories that are going to make it very difficult for Democrats to squirm out of the cage in which they find themselves. Patty McMurray over at thegatewaypundit.com posted, "Busted in Minnesota. Duo pleads guilty after flooding election offices with fake voter registrations. Scheme mirrors Michigan GBI Strategies voter fraud investigation with 0 convictions." And this is not going on just here in the States, but I see this is also happening in Europe. In October 2020, only 1 month before the general election, GBI Strategies, a Democrat-funded group, was caught by the Muskegon and Michigan State Police Departments submitting potentially thousands of false voter registration applications to the Muskegon clerk's office. The offices of Democrat Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson and Democrat Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel each had investigators working with the Michigan State Police on the statewide investigation. According to the key suspect in the investigation, GBI Strategies focused on canvassing in urban areas of the state. The Michigan State Police report identifies U.S. Senator Gary Peters, Democrat, and then presidential candidate Joe Biden as the 2 campaigns funding the fraudulent voter registration group's work in the key swing state. In Minnesota, the FBI investigated a similar voter registration fraud scam involving 2 individuals and an unnamed voter registration group that paid them for each registration they submitted. The voter fraud crimes took place between 2021 and 2022. Unlike Michigan, the perpetrators in this case were charged. 2 Nevada residents have pled guilty to filling out hundreds of voter registration forms with false information and then submitting them to 10 Minnesota election offices during the 2022 election. The former West St. Paul, Minnesota residents, 57-year-old Lorraine Lee Coombs and 58-year-old Wani Williams, who are described as longtime romantic partners, were charged Tuesday in U.S. District Court in Minneapolis. The couple was caught and charged with conspiracy to engage in voter registration fraud in Minnesota. They were both charged through a judicial process called information, which indicates to the court their intention to plead guilty. According to court documents, an unnamed voter registration group paid both individuals to create the fake registrations and submit them to 10 different counties in Minnesota. The counties have not been named, but the Carver County Sheriff's Department is mentioned in the U.S. Attorney's press release. Carver County, Minnesota is a swing county, with Republicans holding a slight edge over Democratic voters. Creating large numbers of new voters out of thin air could significantly impact the outcome of their elections. The U.S. Attorney's Office District of Minnesota had this to say about the charges that resulted from a 2-year investigation in the voter fraud scam. "Election fraud strikes at the heart of our democracy," said Acting U.S. Attorney Joseph H. Thompson. "Thankfully, the FBI stopped this fraud in its tracks before anyone successfully cast a fraudulent ballot, but we will stay vigilant. Whether it's jury bribery, witness tampering, or now election fraud, crimes that threaten our democracy have no place in Minnesota." "Nothing is more central to our democracy than fair and impartially conducted elections," said Special Agent in Charge Alvin M. Winston Sr. of the FBI Minneapolis. Through their actions, Combs and Williams attempted to deprive the citizens of Minnesota of a secure and reliable election process. Along with our partners, the FBI will stop at nothing to identify and bring to justice anyone who threatens the security of our electoral system. According to court documents, Williams then provided the complete voter registration forms to Foundation One, an entity seeking to register voters in Minnesota, which submitted the false voter registration applications to county election offices across Minnesota. Foundation One paid Williams for the registrations, and Williams split the proceeds with Combs. According to Alpha News, Minnesota Secretary of State Steve Simon stated that his office had partnered with local election officials who utilized verification tools to identify inconsistencies and report them to law enforcement and Simon's office. The extensive checks in Minnesota's voter registration process ensured that the fraudulent applications were immediately flagged and no ineligible votes were cast, Simon added. In Michigan, when it was discovered that GBI Strategies, a Democrat-funded voter registration group, was sending packages filled with fake voter registrations from a hotel in Auburn Hills, Michigan, to clerks' offices across the state of Michigan, Corey Ames, an investigator working for Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, was assigned to the case. Curiously, Ms. Benson, a Democrat who's now running for governor of the state, kept the investigation hidden from the public. Moreover, Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson kept the information hidden from the clerks, who were never told to be on the lookout for the fraudulent voter applications. Unlike the Minnesota Secretary of State, who was transparent about their findings, Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson kept the statewide investigation into GBI Strategies a secret from Michigan clerks tasked with determining whether the voter registrations they received in the mail were legitimate or fraudulent. Michigan clerks used Facebook to compare notes when they received what they considered suspicious activities. Over at decrypt.co is the article, "The Cryptographic Fix for U.S. Elections is Still Sitting on the Shelf." A former voting tech auditor claims that voting machines are still lacking key security fixes flagged in 2006, leaving U.S. elections vulnerable. It's written by Jason Nelson. In 2006, software engineer Michael P. uncovered dangerous flaws in U.S. voting machines, flaws he says still threaten American elections today. Hired by the Election Science Institute, where he served as Chief Technology Officer, he was flown to the headquarters of election vendor Election Systems and Software, ES&S, in Omaha, Nebraska. His task was to analyze the company's iVotronic voting system. For over a week, Michael uncovered a wide range of issues, including bad code practices, backdoors, static passwords, and most importantly, what he described as a complete lack of end-to-end cryptographic proofs. The biggest thing that wasn't there was end-to-end cryptographic proofs, Michael told Decrypt in an interview, meaning there's no way the machine, even with perfect external security, could know if a ballot is legitimate or if it's been counted twice, 3 times, 10 times, or 1,000 times. The CEO of blockchain security and identity software company Matterify, Michael said the vulnerability isn't hypothetical, it's easily exploitable by anyone with access to voting machines and voter registration systems. You could just run the same ballot through 10 times, and that's still true today, and it'll just count as 10 votes, he explained. And the scanner doesn't know any better, and neither does the tabulator. The tabulator in the central precinct is like, oh, it was 10 votes. Michael said the separation of ballot and voter record systems often makes reconciliation impossible without referring to original paper records. There's no anonymous serialization of each ballot that would allow the system to know that each serialized ballot has to be counted only once. The solution, according to Michael, involves software, not hardware, and builds on cryptographic techniques first developed in the 1980s by David Chaum, a cryptographer who pioneered digital cash and introduced blind signatures, allowing transactions to be verified without revealing their contents. Chaum later founded DigiCash, an early digital currency, and proposed cryptographic voting systems that preserve anonymity while enabling public verification. His work laid key foundations for both secure e-voting and modern cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. What you want is the machine at the end, the central count tabulator or election management system, gets a vote definition, and you have a Chaumian blinded serialization on every ballot, Michael said. So, like in LA County, that output ballot that's printed has a serial number. That serial number doesn't identify the voter, but it tells the tabulator in the central precinct, hey, this is a unique ballot. If I see 2 of them, then somebody cheated, he added, especially if I see 50 of them. In Michael's proposed model, there would be 3 counts: the paper ballots, the conventional digital tally, and a third cryptographic count. The way you see cheating is the digital count says there are 100 votes, and the cryptographic count says there should only be 90, Michael said. Now you know someone injected 10 votes. In 2020, Michael was hired to conduct forensic analysis in Antrim County, Michigan, after a brief vote counting error triggered widespread speculation. There was a vote flip in Antrim County by roughly 2,000 votes, where one day it was 2,000 for Biden and the next day it was 2,000 for Trump, he recalled. What really happened is the ballot definition was misconfigured so that the system thought that the votes for Trump were for Biden. He said that when the ballots were rescanned with the correct definition file, everything went back to normal. Michael emphasized that while the error was technical, the optics of the situation fed public suspicion. There wasn't a huge hostile attack, but as a voter being riled up by the media, particularly right-wing media, people are going to want answers, he said, adding that such confusion is exactly what end-to-end, off-chain cryptographic proofs are designed to prevent. But while he found no evidence of remote hacking or software backdoors, Michael did say he encountered signs of possible ballot injection during his analysis. If you have a ballot with 42 choices, and in the analysis you see 100 ballots with all 42 filled out exactly the same way, you're like, probably not real, he said. That's the stuff I found some evidence of in Antrim County. Asked why cryptographic ballot serialization hasn't been implemented, Michael pointed to entrenched systems and corporate reluctance to make changes, adding that proposals for secure voting often failed to gain traction because they're too complicated. They're suggesting all sorts of really, really difficult to use schemes, stuff that people are just like, if you're a voting machine manufacturer, this isn't going to make any sense, he said. Several technologies aim to improve election security and trust. In April, New York Assemblyman Clyde Vannell introduced a bill that would use blockchain technology to secure voter records and election results. While blockchain has been promoted as a solution for secure voting, Michael argued that the core issue doesn't require that level of complexity. All you're trying to do is solve a simple problem, get an accurate count of legitimate votes, he said. Extra complexity is unnecessary. A lot of people push blockchain because it's popular, but you don't actually need it. By contrast, Michael says his solution works with current machines. I'm just saying, look, make it a software upgrade to the existing system and work with Dominion, work with ES&S, and you can just turn it on or off, he said. Asked how adoption might happen, Michael suggested legislation or mandates from jurisdictions that oversee elections. Voting manufacturers and their customers, counties, need big precincts to push for change, he explained. If a law said that by 2028 or 2032, voting systems must include end-to-end crypto proofs, we'd be in business. The advantage, according to him, would be clarity in future elections, especially in heated contests where trust is fragile. Again, this is over at decrypt.co. I'll leave the link to this and all the stories that I cover on this week's show on my account at Gab. You can find me at BACFA. Well, let's not forget those folks that are still doing real digging out there. Over at redstate.com, Bob Hogue posted O'Keefe Media Group catches Johnson & Johnson scientist admitting their COVID vaccine was never safe and effective. This is by Bob Hogue. Investigative journalist James O'Keefe and his O'Keefe Media Group, aptly shortened as OMG, are at it again. O'Keefe made his name first with Project Veritas and later with his newer outfit by catching politicians and big company executives saying things on undercover video that they really wish they hadn't. Now, one of his reporters captured a lead scientist in regulatory affairs at pharmaceutical giant Johnson & Johnson, saying the company did not test its COVID vaccine properly and that it wasn't actually effective. Color me shocked. Actually, I'm not in the slightest. We didn't do the typical tests, said Joshua Reese, who revealed on hidden camera that the typical clinical process was abandoned for the COVID-19 vaccine, knowingly bypassing standard testing protocols under pressure from the U.S. government and public demand. He added, "This was just, let's test it on some lab models and just throw it to the wind and see what happens." He acknowledged that the public wasn't informed about the shortcuts, asking, "Do you have any idea the lack of research that was done on those products?" Reese claimed, "People wanted it, we gave it to them." Okay, so they didn't test it properly, but it would at least stop you from getting the virus, right? Well, not according to Reese. While public officials claimed the vaccines were safe and effective, Reese pushed back. "There's no proof. None of that stuff was safe and effective," he said, adding that the industry relies on a benefit-risk trade-off to justify product launches. And there's a video link here. I knew back in 2021 that the J&J Vax was junk for two reasons. You see, I took it. I did not want to, but it was the only way I would be allowed to see a seriously ailing close relative. And the very next day, the government issued a temporary pause on its use due to concerns it could cause blood clots. That sure made me feel good. Not too much longer after that, I came down with COVID, some vaccine. Months later, Joe Biden was still telling us that if you got the jab, you wouldn't get the Wuhan flu. That, to put it mildly, was simply not true, just like so much else of what they sold us. Needless to say, I refused all boosters and thankfully never got a dose of the experimental mRNA shots that were being peddled by Pfizer and Moderna. Raise your hand if you know someone who got addicted to getting boosted endlessly but seemed to come down with the virus once a month. Reese also pointed to the immense pressure the company was under as people wanted a solution to the global crisis. "The government is like, we need help, you're solving this problem," he said. "People panic, so they try to solve it in whatever way they think is good." Unfortunately, we cannot know how much truth is being told here because sometimes in these undercover situations, the unwitting subjects can boast, try to impress a date, make themselves sound more important at their companies than they really are, etc. Nevertheless, I'm still looking forward to hearing what Johnson & Johnson has to say about these remarks. Reese was confronted on camera by O'Keefe about his comments, but quickly clammed up and tried to get away as fast as he could. OMG ends their article with, "Stay tuned for part 2. That should be interesting indeed." Joe Biden, Anthony Fauci, and company's response to COVID was one of the biggest unconstitutional power grabs of all times. And that is the story over at redstate.com.
Well, I think one of the things that's had a lot of folks up in arms is that ICE agents, unlike other law enforcement, have been masked to protect their identities. Like, that's not something that we've really had on this scale in this country.
Well, we never had the scale of attacks on ICE we have now, up 700% attacks on ICE. Doxing against ICE agents.
Well, you've had increased attacks on police officers as well in the wake of the defund the police movement, too, but they haven't put masks on.
You name a police agency that has a 700% increase on assaults. Name one.
I haven't looked at that data, yeah.
You won't find one. The attacks on ICE is unprecedented, 700% increase. And we're not even talking about the doxing of agents, their spouses, and their children. So they're wearing masks to help give them some sort of protection. But the same people that are complaining about ICE wearing masks, have they ever said anything about BLM protesters wearing masks?
Well, I mean, let
me answer though. Yeah, okay. Have they ever said anything about the mass protesters that became criminals on college campuses that threatened Jewish students and took over buildings, destroyed property? They were all wearing masks. Did anybody pass legislation saying they can't wear a mask during a protest? No. We're talking about law enforcement officers who have a dangerous job.
Who are upset about that. But
have you seen any legislation proposed to remove masks from protesters that become criminals, that take over college campus? You haven't. And look at the BLM protesters, how many lives were lost, how much property was stolen. They're all wearing masks. Did anybody propose legislation saying it's illegal to wear a mask in public while you're protesting or no, there isn't. This is attacking ICE officers. The Democrats want to vilify men and women of ICE and border. And I said from day one, when President Trump won office and I came back and said, now the vilification starts, right? Now it's the racist ICE, the racist border patrol for simply enforcing the law to deal with the repercussions of Biden administration's open borders, where millions of criminals and public safety threats were released in this country. So I support ICE wearing masks. You're still wearing insignia. You got HSI, ERO, or FBI, DEA. But there needs to be some level of protection because the tax is unprecedented. 700%, for God's sake.
Should there be an investigation or a special counsel investigation?
I don't know. I'm not an attorney. I just find them guilty and hang them publicly. I mean, that's not over the top either. I'm ready. I'm over it. It disgusts me. I'm big on clarity and transparency, and you know, that's good reason people don't trust government, either party.
Have the organizers of the July 17th demonstrations approached you?
Interests aligned with the organizers of the July 17th movement have approached us. And in fact, we rejected an offer that probably is worth around $20 million.
$20 million?
Correct. I mean, this is a nationwide thing, right? It's not to say I would have made $20 million personally, but the value of the contract would have been worth around that amount nationwide to organize huge demonstrations around the country. But personally, I just don't think it's effective. So I'm not trying to call myself virtuous for rejecting it. What I'm saying is I'm rejecting it not because I don't want to take the business, but because, frankly, this is going to be ineffective. It's going to make us all look bad.
So I asked Swart who exactly offered him the $20 million. That, of course, was the natural question, but he says he would not say, says he does not talk about who exactly his clients are, that it would be bad for business, and he's been in business for 15 years, and he has to turn down a lot of contracts. But, you know, interesting, $20 million is it's a lot of money.
Oh, Brian, quickly, before I let you go, did he explain about why he doesn't want to be involved with Thursday's protests?
Well, he said he had some concern about violence based on what he's seen in the past, but mostly he just doesn't think that it's productive or really making a difference big picture about how the country feels about President Trump. And he says he just didn't want to get involved.
People don't know is before he said fight, 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 I could see him. He says USA twice. He's still on the ground. And then I see him turn and get up and say fight, fight, fight. Wow. And so we talked about that. And I said, why? And he said, well, at that moment I wasn't Donald Trump. I was symbolic, even though I wasn't president yet, again. I had once been president. I had an obligation to show that the country is strong, that we will not be defeated, and that we are resolute. I did not want to be the symbol of America being weak.
Too dangerous to keep, too feeble to let go, and you want to bite the hand. Should have stopped this long ago. Go now, you've been set free. Another month or so you'll be gorging on me. Lively smile. I see you slither away with your skin and your tail, your flickering tongue and your rattling scale like a real reptile. Had you coil around my arm? How could you ever know how I loved your diamond eyes? But that was long ago. Go now, you've been set free. Another month or so you've been was the apple of my eye. It wasn't long ago, now you've been set free. Another month or so you'll be poisoning me. Bloody smile. I see you slither away with the skin in your tail, your flickering tongue and your rattling scales like a real red sign. Oh, go now, you've been set free. Another month or so you'll be poisoning me. Bloody smile. I see you slither away with your skin and your tail, your flickering tongue and your rattling scale like a real red sign.
Brownstone.org has the article, Why Are Taxpayers Still Funding These Injection Mandates? This is by Lucia Sinatra. It was nerve-wracking, to say the least, having a high school student who had gotten into his dream college in mid-December 2020 but was uncertain if he could attend the following fall due to COVID-19 vaccine mandates. Those harrowing days and nights we spent focusing on little else as we scoured college websites to eventually find what we pretty much expected would come to pass. It started in April of 2021 when Rutgers University and then Harvard University announced their students would be required to take COVID-19 vaccines prior to enrollment. In these early days, I remember thinking that surely they will reveal some scientific data showing these vaccines could prevent transmission and severe illness or death to justify the mandates, but alas, the wait was in vain. Living up to their cult behavior reputation, by the summer of 2021, over 1,000 colleges announced the exact same fear-fueled narrative and implemented some of the world's most oppressive mandate policies. By August, millions of college students would be mandated to take primary series COVID-19 vaccines prior to enrollment, many without enough notice to get their deposits back, transfer colleges, or even file for an exemption. The directive was clear. Take these novel medical treatments with zero scientific evidence to show you need them, or don't bother showing up. The best and brightest minds in academia never demanded to see the scientific data to justify their college's strict mandate policies, and never demanded the reasoning behind their administration's summoning a 100% compliance rate, but instead elevated the propaganda in lockstep fashion. To this day, it is astounding to think of what transpired and that so few questioned the lack of supporting science, either because they were aghast to consider that our federal government was responsible for perpetrating the greatest crime against humanity the world has ever seen, or just because it was easier to comply and convince others to do the same. Some of us could see the writing on the wall. We knew colleges and universities were going to take this global pandemic opportunity to manipulate and control their vulnerable and young, healthy adult populations into compliance, and that is exactly what they did. I kept hoping I was wrong, and once more data was released, these institutions would reverse course, but I was wrong then, and I'm still wrong now. Health science students are still being coerced to take COVID-19 vaccines either prior to enrollment in their institutional program or prior to the start of their practical training at hospitals and clinical partner programs. In fact, they are the only college students still being coerced to take COVID-19 vaccines, and most of the time it feels as though there is no end in sight. When President Trump signed Executive Order 14214, he promised to end federal funding to colleges that still mandate COVID-19 vaccines. However, that has not happened yet, and who knows if it ever will. For example, the majority of health science degrees in our country are conferred by colleges and universities, and health science students at some institutions are still required to take COVID-19 vaccines. Why haven't these institutions been defunded in accordance with Executive Order 14214? To be clear, it is not new that health science students have different vaccination requirements than students who are not healthcare majors. However, regarding COVID-19 vaccines in particular, the faculty and staff who teach these students at the college program or at the hospital or clinical facility where they're required to complete practicums are often no longer required to take these vaccines. In sum, we have a number of institutions that have yet to be defunded as promised by President Trump, and we have students at these institutions who are subject to unjustifiable, disparate treatment. So what gives? To be perfectly honest, I have no idea other than these colleges have not been held accountable for their unscientific continuation of COVID-19 vaccine mandates for health science students. Non-healthcare students at all U.S. colleges are no longer required to comply with COVID-19 vaccine mandates to enroll, yet health science majors who share the same classrooms, dining halls, and residence halls are still subject to mandates to either enroll or complete practicums or both. It's our position that these blatantly discriminatory policies persist because explicit action has not been taken to end them. On April 5th, 2024, Representative Mark Messmer, Republican from Indiana, introduced H.R. 3044, and it has gained widespread support. This newly introduced legislation proposes to codify Executive Order 14214 by promising to withhold federal funds for any college or university that continues to mandate a required COVID-19 vaccination. It's a good start, as it is generally harder for a future administration to reverse a bill that has become law rather than an executive order. But our position is that the bill is incomplete. No college mandates, which has led the fight to end all college student COVID-19 vaccine mandates, along with several signatories, has formally requested that before the bill becomes law, it must be amended. For H.R. 3044 to definitively end all COVID-19 vaccine mandates in higher education, it must be amended to explicitly include all teaching programs required for health science students to complete their degree. To clarify, not only must federal funding be removed from all colleges, universities, and any other institutions that continue to mandate COVID-19 vaccines, but also all teaching programs at hospitals and clinical partners with whom these institutions contract to provide practical training so that students can freely apply to and enter practicums, clinical rotations, internships, and residencies, which all degree-granting institutions have made a requirement for graduation. A few weeks ago, we mailed this letter to all representatives who are supporting this bill, requesting explicit amendments, including those outlined in the previous paragraph. We have also emailed the letter to each of the senior staff members and have followed up with several phone calls making our case. From the positive feedback we continue to receive, we are hopeful that the representatives are willing to consider and incorporate our proposed amendments to H.R. 3044. However, I have one simple ask. We cannot get the representatives to devote proper attention to these amendments without your help. Please take a few minutes to print out a copy of our letter and mail it or email it to the representatives, encouraging them to amend the bill, as well as your own representative and senators. Together, we might just put an end to health science student COVID-19 vaccine mandates. If you've never taken any action to end college student COVID-19 vaccine mandates, this is a wonderful opportunity, and it may just make all the difference. Again, this is Lucia Sinatra over at brownstone.org. DailyCaller.com has the article, Microsoft's use of China-based engineers could be leaving Pentagon tech exposed to hackers. This is by Wallace White. Microsoft has relied on engineers based in China for years to help maintain some of the U.S. Department of Defense's most sensitive cloud computing systems, potentially leaving them vulnerable to hacking, according to a new investigation from ProPublica released Tuesday. Because U.S. law prohibits foreign nationals from directly accessing federal systems that handle sensitive data, Microsoft has been funneling work through American digital escorts, low-paid workers with security clearances but often possessing limited technical expertise who input commands from more skilled China-based engineers into federal networks, according to ProPublica. The arrangement, largely unknown even within the federal government, is raising alarms among national security and cybersecurity experts as the engineers could gain access to sensitive government data with little oversight, potentially exposing critical systems to Chinese cyber espionage. The system has reportedly been in place for over a decade, ProPublica reported. China remains America's top cybersecurity adversary, posing both the threat to government and private sector entities, according to a February 2024 report from the Office of Director of National Intelligence. This arrangement is used to handle high-impact level information, which includes data that involves the protection of life and financial ruin, where loss of confidentiality, integrity, or availability could be expected to have a severe or catastrophic adverse effect on organizational operations, organizational assets, or individuals, according to U.S. government policy reviewed by ProPublica. The escorts effectively act as middlemen, copying and pasting commands from foreign workers into Pentagon-linked systems, in some cases without fully understanding the functions of those commands. We're trusting that what they're doing isn't malicious, but we really can't tell. One escort, who works for Microsoft contractor Insight Global and spoke on condition of anonymity, told ProPublica they're telling non-technical people very technical directions. The current Insight Global escort said, adding that the foreign engineer could install an update allowing an outsider to access the network. If I were an operative, I would look at that as an avenue for extremely valuable access. We need to be very concerned about that. Harry Coker, former senior executive at the CIA and the National Security Agency, told ProPublica. Over the years, various individuals involved in the work said they had warned the company about the risks. Despite the presence of an escort with a security clearance, we found that foreign engineers have access to details about the federal clouds that hackers can exploit. If someone ran a script called fix_servers.sh, but it actually did something malicious, then escorts would have no idea, a former Microsoft engineer who worked on the escort system told ProPublica. Microsoft told Daily Caller that its personnel and contractors are audited by the U.S. government and that Chinese engineers in question would have no direct access to customer data or customer systems. As part of our Secure Future initiative and in accordance with Zero Trust principles, Microsoft assumes anyone that has access to production systems, regardless of location or role, can pose a risk to the system, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and we establish layers of mitigation at the platform level with security and monitoring controls to detect and prevent threats, a Microsoft spokesperson said in a statement to the Daily Caller. This includes approval workflows for system changes and automated code reviews to quickly detect and prevent the introduction of vulnerabilities. Many of the escorts are former military personnel paid as little as $18 an hour and lack the technical training to identify malicious activity. Microsoft employs approximately 50 escorts, each of whom partake in hundreds of interactions with China-based engineers and plug in the engineers' commands into federal computers. Notably, in 2023, Chinese hackers compromised the emails of the U.S. Commerce and State Departments, including those of the U.S. ambassador to China, a breach that was ultimately blamed on vulnerabilities created by Microsoft's security lapses. I probably should have known about this, John Sherman, former Chief Information Officer for the DoD, told ProPublica. Moreover, China hawks point out that Chinese law allows the Communist Party to collect data from companies and individuals at will. It would be difficult for any Chinese citizen or company to meaningfully resist a direct request from security forces or law enforcement, Jeremy Daum, a senior research fellow at the Paul Tsai China Center at Yale Law School, told ProPublica. The Pentagon did not respond to Daily Caller for a comment. That is over at dailycaller.com. Good old Tyler Durden over at ZeroHedge.com posted, another conspiracy theory comes true. California bill passes to buy fire-ravaged Palisades for low-income apartments. The writing is on the wall, bold and in large font for private landowners and homeowners in areas governed by socialist-aligned officials who have zero respect for private property. They're coming for your land. Remember Marxist-aligned New York City Democrat candidate Zohran Mamdani, who called for the government to seize luxury condos to house the homeless during the coronavirus pandemic. These far-left officials have made their Marxist intentions clear and can no longer be ignored. Shift to the West Coast. Homeowners in the fire-ravaged Palisades, part of the Los Angeles area governed by Marxist-aligned Mayor Karen Bass, have been left homeless and with more questions than answers. The top questions: if the Pacific Palisades Reservoir had been filled during last year's wildfire, could their homes have been saved? Why did the city neglect the reservoir, and was it intentional? But that's after the fact, and thousands of hardworking families have been left homeless due to what appears to be epic fire mismanagement by Democrats in City Hall. The whole global warming narrative isn't sticking this time, overshadowed by sheer incompetence that increasingly looks intentional with each passing month. And there's some media postings here to back that up. Just the News reports that California Senate Bill 549 has passed, allowing Los Angeles County and other municipalities to create resilient rebuilding authorities, RRAs, funded by property taxes. In other words, Democrats want to use public funds to acquire fire-destroyed lots cheaply, coordinate rebuilding, and develop low-income housing. Here's more. As a funding mechanism, the bill would allow the RRA for the Los Angeles wildfires to issue, receive, and administer funds, including but not limited to tax increment financing, federal loans and grants, state loans and grants, and philanthropic grants to support recovery. RRA law would then be able to use taxpayer funds to oversee most of the construction process and would be granted the power to purchase lots at a fair price for land banking, purchase critical construction materials in bulk, and support the reconstruction workforce by partnering with trades, facilitating training and workforce development, and creating temporary workforce housing. RRA law would also facilitate reconstruction and lost rental housing stock, including by promotion of accessory dwelling units, senior serving housing, and replacement of affordable housing lost in the fires. The remaining funding could be used for multifamily affordable housing projects, transit capital projects, and transit-oriented development projects. Wednesday's hearing is set for just over a week after Governor Gavin Newsom announced the allocation of $101 million in taxpayer funds for multifamily low-income housing development in communities in Los Angeles devastated by the Palisades, Eaton, and Hughes wildfires. In conjunction with the governor's funding announcement, which provides per-unit funding of up to $450,000 in loans and up to $90,000 in grants, funding from RRA law could make it easier for more income-restricted housing to be built in the Los Angeles area. In Los Angeles, 73% of city planning applications for new units are for income-restricted housing. In the previous 4 years, income-restricted housing represented only an average of 30%, meaning the latest data reflects a precipitous drop-off in production for standard market-rate housing. Self-proclaimed investor and CIA NSA contractor whistleblower Tony Saruga commented on Just the News reporting. Others responded to Saruga by saying, "Another conspiracy theory becomes a reality. Fire victims were told this wasn't going to happen. It only took 6 months. But don't worry, if you broke federal law entering the country illegally and ICE looking for you stresses you, Mayor Karen Bass is sending you money." Almost as if this thing was on purpose. News scum and Bass need to be removed. It was carried out as planned. They don't care about any of us. Gotta love it when a plan comes together. I wonder if California's civil war will start over this. Please stop them. News scum called us liars when we said the only rebuilding done will be low-income housing. Newsom is evil, unreal. That area should be protected. Imagine all the traffic on that highway. What a stupid decision. And there's more here over at zerohedge.com. It ends as, for property owners across the U.S., if you're governed by far-left state and local leadership, this should be a major wake-up call. The Democratic Party is increasingly infested with Marxists who want to seize your land. Yep, not much has changed in the past 2 years and more. Again, over at Zero Hedge. Over at Statista.com, Anna Fleck posted, AI, are Americans worrying about the wrong jobs? The rapid adoption of AI has stirred up worry, or at least apprehension, among many workers, as it is still unknown exactly what the impacts of the technology will be. Some of this worry could be misaligned, as new survey data from Pew Research Center shows, with a gap in understanding over which jobs are most at risk, having grown between the general public and AI experts. According to the poll conducted between August and October 2024, U.S. adults underestimate the impacts of AI on jobs for lawyers and truck drivers. By contrast, the U.S. public was more likely than experts to think medical doctors, teachers, and musicians are at risk of AI-related job cuts over the next 20 years, although half of U.S. adults and experts say there will be job loss in each of these areas. A majority in both groups thought that AI will lead to fewer jobs for cashiers and journalists. Another key takeaway, however, is the general climate of uncertainty that exists among the public, with between 13 to 26% of U.S. adults saying they are unsure whether or not there will be job losses per polled job. The survey also found that while AI experts tend to be more positive than the public about the potential of AI, a majority in both groups were concerned that government regulation of AI will not go far enough. Pew researchers also reported that more men were optimistic about AI than women, and that respondents generally agreed that men's views, as well as white adults' views, are most represented in AI design than other groups. Well, now there's a tool you can use against the AI. You can blame it on being racist and other things. There's a couple of graphics here about the info you can see over at Statista.com. Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode. From the white sand beaches of the Emerald Coast in the free state of Florida on the Gulf of America, this is BACFA. See you next week.
Thanks for joining us for Atomic Biscuits. Tune in again next week for more news and music. Check out BACFA on Gab at BACFA, as well as Bitchute, Rumble, D-Live and Odysee. Listen to WBN 324 on radio stations around the world, on many streaming platforms, and World Broadcasting Network WBN 324.zil.